Good morning. It is Thursday, April the 28th, and this is The Drill. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare and the Star-Spangled Banner and the Pledge of Allegiance, we will have no free lunch. What Matters, which is chapter 6 in the book, The Collapse of Parenting, and Yankee Stadium, the second part of Chapter 24 in the book, The Adventures of My Bicentennial Year. All that and more when I get back. Thank you. And now the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for April the 28th. Cast out the spirits of affliction and sorrow. My child, I will keep you in perfect peace if your mind is stayed on me. Trust in me and seek after me. I have heard the sighing of your spirit, and I know when your heart pants and your strength fails you. Place your hope in me, for I will cast out the spirits of affliction and sorrow from your life. Do not be conformed to the cares and problems of this world, but be transformed by renewing your mind in me, that you may prove my good and acceptable and perfect will for you. Be renewed in the spirit of your mind as you put on the new man of true righteousness and holiness. Set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth. Rest your hope fully in the grace of my Son, Jesus Christ. Psalm 38, verses 9 through 10, Romans chapter 12, verse 2, Ephesians chapter 4, verse 23, 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13. Prayer declaration. Father, in your power, I will strip all power from evil spirits that would oppress me. I rebuke and cast out all spirits of poverty. In the name of Jesus, I rebuke all spirits of madness and confusion that would attempt to oppress my mind. Through your power, I rebuke and cast out all spirits of affliction and sorrow that would seek to bring me low. The enemy will not take my inheritance through oppression. Amen. And that was the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for April 28th. And I do these daily declarations because there's so many people on the radio that claim to be conservative, claim to be Christian, but can't even be bothered to offer a prayer. I use the daily declarations instead of some other types of prayers. I used to offer prayers from an app I had called Laudate, and they had daily prayers in there. But I like this one better because they're biblical examples on how to defeat the devil. And that in our society, we've forgotten about the devil. The devil has been removed from conversation. Nobody talks about the devil and the influence of the devil on the world at large. So that's the reason that I go ahead and do the daily declarations from spiritual warfare. And this one was for April 28th. Thank you, thank you. And now there's no free lunch. Quote, holding eternal justice to include the inalienable right of every man freely to exchange the result of his labor for the productions of other people, and maintaining the practice of protecting one part of the community at the expense of all other classes to be unsound and unjustifiable. Carry out to the fullest extent the true and peaceful principles of free trade by removing all existing obstacles to the unrestricted employment of industry and capital, unquote. Richard Cobden. Though touchy and even toxic in modern times, Cobden here highlights the real objection to free trade from her critics, a protection of one part of the community at the expense of another. Such protectionism has a truly sympathetic appeal, and yet economically misses a major point of economics. Not judging the wisdom of a policy on how it impacts one group in one short period, but on all groups in long periods. And that was There's No Free Lunch. Thank you. Now a little bit from part 1 of chapter 6 of The Collapse of Parenting, and by Dr. Sachs. Now, this is in part 2. There's 2 parts to the book. Part 2 is about solutions. Part 1 is about problems. Part 2 is about solutions. That's one of the reasons I like this book, is that it does offer solutions. So many times when you're listening to talk radio, you have people that are lining up litanies of misery. This is no good. That sucks. The Democrats are ruining the country, et cetera, et cetera. But the same people that are doing this, that are making people, demotivating their audience, really, have no answers for what should be done. They have no solutions to the problems that they are announcing to the world. So that's why I like this book, because it does offer solutions to the crisis, if you will, of the collapse of parenting. So this is chapter 6, and it's titled, What Matters? Which of the following, measured when a child is 11 years of age, is the best predictor of happiness and overall life satisfaction roughly 20 years later when that child has become a 31 or 32-year-old adult? A, IQ, B, grade point average, C, self-control, D, openness to new ideas, E, friendliness. The correct answer is C, self-control. Until recently, the answer to this question would have been a matter of opinion or guesswork. The scientific study of long-term outcomes was mired in confusion for most of the 20th century. One reason for the confusion is the sheer number of human personality traits. People can be cheerful or gloomy, generous or stingy, prudent or reckless, truthful or dishonest, rude or polite, curious or incurious. We get the point. It took psychologists most of the 20th century to figure out that human personality can be mapped onto a 5-dimensional graph. Those 5 dimensions are separate from intelligence, which is best understood as a factor that influences personality, but is not in itself intrinsic to personality. To put it another way, psychologists now tell us that your personality is separate from how smart you are, just as it's separate from how tall you are or how physically strong you are. The 5 dimensions of personality are conscientiousness, openness, extroversion, agreeableness, and emotional stability. Each of these dimensions has multiple subordinate traits. For example, some of the traits associated with conscientiousness include self-control, honesty, and perseverance. The association is not 100%. You can find people who exhibit self-control and honesty, but fail to persevere, to give an example. Nevertheless, this 5-factor model of human personality has opened up a new era in quantitative psychological research. It is now fairly easy for a modern researcher to look for correlations between personality traits and outcomes, and to separate these outcomes from other factors such as IQ, household income, race, and ethnicity. When these correlations are studied longitudinally over years and decades, when we consider how a trait possessed by a child at age 10 in 1980 predicts the individual's health and wealth at age 38 in 2008, we can begin to move from a statistical correlation to causal inference. We can start to say with some confidence what matters. We can begin to answer the question, what should we be doing as parents to improve the likelihood of good outcomes for our children? In one study, researchers looked at Americans nationwide from a wide range of backgrounds: affluent and low income, urban and rural, white and black, and Asian and Hispanic. They recorded how much money each person had earned in the past year, how happy they were, how much wealth they possessed overall, how satisfied they were with their lives. The researchers correlated these outcomes with the big 5 factors listed above and separately with intelligence. Not surprisingly, they found the intelligence predicts both income and wealth. People who are more intelligent earn more money and have a higher net worth on average compared with people of below average intelligence. But intelligence does not predict happiness or unhappiness. Smart people are not happier or unhappier on average compared with less intelligent people, nor does intelligence predict life satisfaction. Smarter people may have more money compared with less smart people on average, but they are not any more satisfied with their lives overall. You might reasonably wonder whether any of these big 5 traits could predict happiness and wealth and life satisfaction. Only one does: conscientiousness. Individuals who are more conscientious earn and save more money, even after researchers adjust for intelligence, race, ethnicity, and education. Individuals who are more conscientious are also significantly happier than individuals who are less conscientious, and they are substantially more satisfied with their lives. Other studies have shown that conscientiousness predicts better health and longer life. People who are more conscientious are less likely to become obese. They are less likely to develop Alzheimer's and more likely to live longer and happier lives. In some ways, this is not a new insight. Nearly 300 years ago in 1735, Benjamin Franklin wrote, "Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise." Going to bed early, deliberately abstaining from the temptations of the night, and getting up early, resisting the temptation to sleep in late, are good measures of self-control. When I ask parents whether their kids are on the right road, many respond by mentioning something about grades or test scores. Parents often assume that if their kid is above average as measured by these markers, then their kid has an above average chance of achieving happiness and success. Conversely, if their kid ranks below the 50th percentile in academic achievement, then, let me see here. There it is. Many parents are frantically searching for an explanation and a remedy. In short, many parents have come to assume that good grades and test scores are the best measures of achievement and the most reliable key to future happiness. He goes on to talk about, let's take a closer look at the data. I don't need to do that. Really what you're looking at here, again, what he's setting up here, unfortunately, where he's going wrong, one of the areas where he's going wrong, is we've had the difference between parenting today and parenting when I was growing up is, how did you learn to be a parent? Who taught you to be a parent? Right? And when I was growing up, parents taught their kids how to be a parent. You learned how to parent from your parents and grandparents, from your family. In the 60s and 70s, that started to change. We had these so-called experts who started writing books telling people how it is that they should raise their children. Okay, and that's where we got into the idea of parents as friends to their children rather than being parents. And we were told that what we'd learned, basically, not only what we had learned was wrong, but what our parents had learned, our grandparents, and generations of people had learned was wrong. And I'm wishing that we would have all taken a hard look at that at the time and taken these books and either ignored them, don't buy them in the first place, or if you did buy them, donate them to the library or get rid of them because they're worthless. So, back in a minute. Thank you. So, a kind of an epilogue on this book. I'm going to be dealing with chapter 7, which is called Misconceptions. But the whole book is something that might be good for giving you some ideas, but shouldn't be used as a roadmap, certainly. Basically, when you want to know and understand how to raise kids, you really want to look at your parents, your grandparents, your family members, maybe even extended family, cousins, and whatnot. So the other thing with this book and this the doctor that's writing this is that he's not following his own advice. There's some stories that he tells in the beginning of the book. There's one girl that comes in, and her mother brings her in to the doctor and says, wow, she's got a rash on the corners of her mouth. And the doctor recognizes that this is a vitamin deficiency due to having a poor diet. That she's not getting enough greens. She's not getting her cruciferous vegetables and whatnot, and spinach and things like that. Now, one of the problems here, now he'd recommend that you got to be tough. You got to be the parent, and you got to sit down and say, damn it, you're going to eat your vegetables kind of thing. You got to be firm or whatever. Yeah, fine. Another thing that he didn't even think about was that the issue of whether or not those vegetables are cooked. When I grew up, and probably when he grew up during the time when you got vegetables, you got them maybe raw from the store, might be broccoli, and you plopped them in a pot of water. And you brought the water to a boil, and you left the vegetables in there, and you test them with a fork. And when they seemed that they were soft, then you would go ahead, shut the heat off, and plate the vegetables. And then you might go ahead, put a little bit of butter on them, salt and pepper. But all of a sudden, some guy comes along, again, who wants to be rich and famous. And this is one of the things to do back in the 70s, was to write books telling everybody that everything they know is wrong, and that this particular genius knows everything and knows all the right ways to do things. In this particular case, how to eat or serve vegetables. And he came along and he said, no, all of the when you cook the vegetables, all the nutrients go into the water. So you're cooking the nutrients out of the vegetables. Well, BS, because for generations, people have been cooking vegetables and their children have been just fine. None of them have this crappy crud around the corners of their mouths. They have plenty of energy, etc. They grow up healthy and happy. So right away, we know what he's saying is BS. So what does he recommend? He recommends either raw or heated raw, which is steamed. Okay. Now, if you serve me, I wasn't a big fan of vegetables, but if you'd served me raw vegetables when I was a kid, I would have balked also. I would have been about, no, I don't think I want to eat this. I don't think I want to have anything to do with this. I'd put up more of a fuss about eating the vegetables. Think about it this way. If somebody gave you raw meat, would you want to eat it? Probably not. Neither would I. So that's one of the things. The other thing that the doctor does or fails to do is take his own advice and be a tough doctor. Everybody we all live in this deterministic world in which don't blame him, don't blame me, blame the guy behind the tree. But we lived in a society in which if you weren't doing your job as a parent, somebody was going to bring that to your attention. It was going to be teachers, for instance, that would say, hey, excuse me, but what's going on with your child? What are you doing at home to your child, or failing to do with your child because your child is this, that, or the other problem, or they have, again, this crap around the corners of their mouths. So the doctors were also that way. And what this doctor should have done when that woman brings this daughter in is he tells her, look, take mom aside, leave the kid, and you tell the mom, you make sure she starts eating her vegetables. If she doesn't, I'm going to turn you into Child Protective Services. And furthermore, I don't want to ever see you in my office again, because not only are you a bad parent, you're a bad person. And that's the truth. If you're going to raise your kids, let your kids do whatever the hell they want, learn by hitting all the potholes in the road, you're a terrible parent and a terrible person. And you should have your kids taken away from you and put in a foster home or put up for adoption, if you're going to be like that. But you have to judge. The left has told our society, don't judge, don't judge, don't judge. You have to. You have no other choice. If you're a person, you're not a doctor, but you know that one of the parents, for instance, he also talked about the parents that said, no to drinking and had a breathalyzer in the house. It wouldn't have been a problem for me because I would have called the parents up and I would have said, get your kid home now. And the same thing I would have told him as a parent, not even as a doctor. I would have said, if I ever see your kid drunk again, I'm calling Child Protective Services. I'm calling the Sheriff's Department. I'm calling the Police Department. I'm calling every person I can think of. Now, you and your child get off my property and stay off my property. You're not wanted here. You are not allowed to be here. If you try to step 1 foot on my property, I'll have you trespassed. And what that is called peer pressure. How did the left get the United States of America to where it is today? Peer pressure by people running around shaping the attitudes of their neighbors, friends, and relatives. And the doctor could do the same thing, and you and I can do the same thing, and should. So, but that brings us to the end of chapter 6. I'm not going to bother reading the rest of it. It's all statistics and whatnot, and beside the point. So next time is going to be chapter 7, misconceptions. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the book Tales from My Bicentennial Year by Michael Buell, the story of a family in Gansevoort, New York, in the Adirondacks in 1975. It's from 1975 to 1976, that year. So this is the chapter about Yankee Stadium. And so it's a really, really long chapter. So I thought I was going to be able to do it in 2 things, but instead it's going to be 3. I'm just going to take 3 bites of the apple, so to speak. So this is the second part of the chapter on, let's see, what chapter number is it? 27? Chapter 24, Yankee Stadium. So here we got to get back to where we were. There it is. Mike C's dad explained to us that Yankee Stadium had just reopened. It had been closed for a couple of years so they could renovate it. Oh, and by the way, where we are at in the chapter and in the stories, they're on their way to Yankee Stadium. Several of the dads, the moms decide to get, for whatever reason, stay at home, and the children. So there's Mike, and then there's the Mike C, and Big Gene, and Big Russ, and Huge Gene and Big Russ, and Kathy's there. And so then they got 3 dads, I think, that are in the car. And so they're all going to go to the Yankee game, and it's a 5-hour ride. And so they were on their way, and they're, he's describing all the different things that they're trying to do in order to stay amused, to keep themselves amused. Well, apparently one of the kids, I guess it's Big Russ. Big Russ gets in trouble, and his dad grabs him from the back because they're in the station wagon, and all the kids are way in the back behind the seats. And so his dad grabs Big Russ and puts him up front between the 2 fathers, where they were sitting in the back seat. But so he can keep an eye on him or whatever. So Big Russ gets all upset about this. He doesn't like it because all the other kids are having fun, and Big Russ isn't having fun. So for whatever reason, the way he decided to deal with it was to reach over to Mike's dad, who was driving the car, and pull his baseball cap down over his eyes so he couldn't see while he's driving. And so he ends up slamming on the brakes, pulling over to the side, and popping one of the tires while he was doing this. So that's where we left it off. They were busy fixing the tire on the car. Mike C's dad had explained to us that Yankee Stadium had just reopened. It had been closed for a couple of years so that they could renovate it, make it better. The Yankees had been playing at the Mets Stadium, Shea Stadium. Big John had been to the old Yankee Stadium once, and he was pretty excited to see the new stadium. "Load up and let's go to the game," yelled my dad. Finally, we were ready to go to the game. We herded back into the car. My dad unrolled the window in the back of the tailgate and let us look out to see the city as we drove. We went a few more blocks, and then my dad honked the horn, pointed out the front window, and said, "There it is, kids, the house that Ruth built, Yankee Stadium." We pulled our heads back inside the tailgate, turned around, and slammed our heads into the side windows to get a look. I could not believe it. It looked like some sort of baseball castle, right down to the flags on top of the stadium. The lights on it looked like giant toothbrushes standing over the stadium. My dad found the parking lot, and in we went. As soon as we were past the guys taking your money, my dad made a sharp U-turn and parked all by himself facing back toward the guys. We were the only ones in this section of the lot. There was a gypsy wagon pointing towards home all by itself. Mr. Tidwell sarcastically asked my dad, "Geez, Jerry, can you get any closer to the stadium?" My dad looked over at him and said, "You don't understand, big guy, so we have to walk a little bit now, but at the end of the game, we will be the first ones out." Mind you, my dad was famous for being the first one out at any event and then being the first one to leave. Kathy and I were praying that today he would allow us to see the entire game and not leave early and miss the game. We would never live it down with the guys. Whether it was a family reunion picnic, my dad's office picnic, or anything else, we were the first ones there. There was one family reunion picnic when we missed the whole thing. We got to the state park at 10 a.m. The picnic started at noon. We found the pavilion where we were to meet everyone. My dad had us unload the food, chairs, sodas, tablecloths, toys, etc. out of the wagon. He and Mom got everything all set up, and then he proceeded to make a fire. He had this ingenious system he would use to make coffee. You see, the big guy had to have coffee at all times. This was before the days of Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts coffee shops on every corner. Way before it was cool to walk around with cups of coffee like everybody does now. He would get the charcoal glowing red and put in a pot of water. Get the water nice and hot and make himself a cup of Maxwell House instant coffee. He even had creamers in the cooler, so there we were sitting around the pavilion all by ourselves. We played frisbee for a bit, then lawn darts, which was my favorite, but my mom always worried about lawn darts. She thought they were pretty dangerous. You had this steel-tipped missile you would toss way up in the air and try to get it in this little circle. My mom had this big fear of the lawn dart coming right down and killing one of us. These games were fun for about 5 minutes. Then the fighting started. Probably over some rules of frisbee or whose turn it was for lawn darts or who was closer. My mom suggested that we go on a nature walk with her. She looked over at Dad, who said, "Great idea, go ahead and take them, and I'll wait here." Just what my mom wanted to hear, I'm sure. You'll take these pain-in-the-ass kids, and I'll sit here and drink my coffee. We went up on the nature trail, which was built up pretty good on the signs we saw. We should be seeing birds, snakes, turtles, special trees, plants, mosses, and tons of other things. In reality, all we saw was a path in the woods, which, after you got into a little bit, was extremely heavy with mosquitoes. We were getting attacked by them. They were everywhere, dive-bombing us. We ran back up to the pavilion screaming at the top of our lungs. Dad jumped up from reading the paper. He always brought a paper with him anywhere he went. "What's going on? Who's hurt?" he yelled toward us. "No one is hurt, just tons of bug bites," my mom said back to him. She was looking down at my little brother, Kevin, who is covered in bug bites. He had so many, he looked like he had the chicken pox. My mom started rubbing cream on him. Poor guy, not only did he itch like crazy, but he was covered with white cream. It was now 10:45. An hour and 15 minutes before anyone else was supposed to show up. My dad said, "Let's go walk on the beach." So we followed him to the beach. As we walked, we felt raindrops. Just a few at first. We got to the rocky beach and my dad started skipping stones on the water. My dad got one to skip 6 times. It was pretty cool. The rain got a little heavier, so we headed back to the pavilion. It was now 11 a.m. A full hour until somebody else showed up. We sat under the pavilion, listening to the rain hit the tin roof, lightly at first, then harder still. It got so loud that it sounded like machine guns going off. My dad was pulling all the stuff under the pavilion, as if the lawn darts would melt in the rain. But we ran out and helped him. At 11:30 and still raining, my dad made the call. Game over. Pack it up. Let's go home. There was no arguing with Dad. We just packed up and left. Later, my mom found out that everyone else got there a little after noon. The sun came out, and a great day was had by all. Visions of that day passed through my mind, and I'm sure my sister's mind, as we unloaded everyone from the car and headed into the stadium. I whispered to Kathy, "There's no way he would leave us early. I mean, it's Yankee Stadium. You don't come all this way to leave early, do you?" "Let's hope not," she said. With that, I put it out of my mind, and we headed towards the stadium, marching with all the Yankee fans who hated our guts because we were Sox fans. That's what Mr. Tidwell said. I couldn't believe how many fans were there. Never in my life have I seen so many people. Throngs and throngs of people. Big John, and it looks like a huge herd of cattle heading towards the pen. This pen, however, was awesome. We finally made it into the stadium. Dad barked out his orders. Everyone stays close. As a matter of fact, hold on to your dad's hand or shirt or something. Stay together. Let's not get lost here. Dad wanted to find the seats first, and then we could get something to eat and hopefully check out batting practice or something. We made our way through the crowds, Kathy and me holding Dad's hands. He would stop, wait for the others, and then he'd move ahead again. He went around the stadium for what seemed like hours. There were beer vendors, hot dogs, hamburgers, popcorn, hats, shirts. Heck, it was like a big fair underneath the seats. Finally broke through and came out on the other side, and there were many miles, and there were many miles down by the field. We were in the stadium. I could see the field, the scoreboard, some of the players tossing the ball, but we were way, way, way up. Either way, we were here. We kept climbing up the steep concrete steps, up and up, until finally my dad announced these were our seats. We all piled in. The kids went in first, and the dads took the first 4 seats on the aisles. We were now 2 hours from game time. Being kids, we went hungry and we wanted our souvenirs. So after 5 minutes of getting used to our seats, we were up and off to the fair, downstairs. The first place we went to was a souvenir shop. They had so much stuff. Yankee hats, shirts, pennants, posters, keychains, baseballs, baseball cards, big bats, small bats, what to buy. The pressure was on. My dad announced that we had only 10 minutes in here. Find what you want and let's get out of here, he said. Seems like all of us finally settled on small, foot-long miniature Yankee bats. Then we piled out of there and made it to the food stands. I got 2 hot dogs, fries, Coke, and a big bag of peanuts. It was great. We all had our food, now to navigate back to our seats. We chowed that food down in about 5 seconds. I also had my peanuts and began chomping on them. The guys were asking if we would be able to go down and get autographs from the ball players before the game. We looked down, way down at the field, and the teams seemed to be out there warming up, throwing balls around. Mr. Tidwell, who was the dad next to us, pointed out that a few of the Sox guys were over there playing pepper. Mr. Tidwell had taught us pepper. See, he would say they're playing it the same way. The batter throws the ball up a little bit in front of himself and chops at it with the bat, and then hits a grounder to each guy. You guys are just like the pros when you play that. See, even the pros practice. Every day you need to practice, he would say. Huge Gene asked his dad if we could go down to the field and see the teams. Mr. Tidwell looked down at my dad in the aisle seat. Of course, Dad was reading the paper, the New York Post, I think, with a big picture of the Yankees on the back of it. "Hey, Jerry," yelled down to him, "I'm going to take the kids down and see if we can get close to the field and see the teams." With that, we all stood up and scooted by the dads and followed Mr. Tidwell down the stairs. "Stay close, you guys, and Kathy, I don't want to get blamed for losing any of you," he yelled back to us. Down and down we went. We had to go back under the stands and then out again at a different entrance to the field. Finally, we could actually see the field and make out the numbers on the uniforms and start to recognize them. Mr. Tidwell saw one of the ushers and pulled him aside. The old guy pointed us over this way and that. With that, Mr. Tidwell waved at us to follow him again. Down some more stairs, and voila, we're right next to the field. We must have made it to the Sox side of things because the only team in front of us was the Sox. We kept yelling at them to sign our programs, but no one ever came over. The best we got was a wave from Jim Rice. My sister swears to this day that Yaz smiled at her. It was awesome, right up close to our heroes. There's Fred Lynn, Fisk, and all the guys. It was great. The best part was we still had the whole game to go. After a few minutes, the usher guy came by waving us back up to our seats. "Time to go, guys. Got to get everyone in their seats," he said, and we began our trek back up the mountain of concrete stairs. We got to our seats just as the Yankees were taking the field for the game. Before we could even sit down, the PA announcer told us all to stand up for the national anthem. We looked at the field searching for the flag, which I never did find. My dad told us to take our hats off and hold them with our right hand over our hearts. The part at the end of the long song brought a long round of applause. Big John yelled down to us, Look, it's Catfish Hunter pitching today. You guys are lucky to see him." We sure were, we thought, but Catfish was known to us as a Sox killer. He always pitched them tough. Mr. Tidwell leaned over to us. "Look, boys, old Catfish just looks mean, doesn't he? He looks like he hates the Sox. Look at him, growl." Then he laughed and went back to talking to the dads. It was at this game that I started to realize my eyesight was not as good as the other kids. I went through the rest of the summer squinting. When we went back to school, I got an eye exam, and sure enough, I needed glasses to see far away. I remember the guys pointing out the numbers on the players and following the ball and the pitches and the hits. Heck, all I could see was the green grass, the brown infield, the pitcher's mound, and some guys on them. There might as well have been ants, but it was still great to be there. I just kept eating my peanuts and drinking my Coke, trying to follow along with the game, and the guy's old Catfish was pitching a gem, at least according to Mr. Tidwell. The Sox were pitching a guy we'd never really heard of, Dick Pole. He seemed to be holding his own. The score at the end of 3 innings was 0-0. We were hoping to see a home run or something, but so far there was nothing. I don't think there was even a guy on base yet. And that's the end of part 2 of chapter 24, Yankee Stadium. Back in a minute. Thank you. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all of the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers, and reminding you to listen to the John and Ken Show on KFI AM 640, Monday through Friday from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific Time. Also, KFI needs to bring back Brian Suits and his show, The Dark Secret Place. # bring back Brian Suits. Until next time, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.